She was born to silk and expectation. He was raised among horses and silence. Their worlds were never meant to touch, until they did. When a fleeting moment sparks something neither of them can name, a quiet bond forms in the shadows of a rigid estate. But in a land ruled by titles and appearances, love has no place between a baron's daughter and a stable boy. Unless they're willing to leave everything behind. Hello family, welcome to Storytime with Imzi. Please subscribe and like, it means the world to us. Also share this video to your friends and loved ones and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. The storm rolled in just past midday, heavy and brooding. Clouds as dark as iron stretched across the Yorkshire sky, and thunder cracked like musket fire over the moors. Owen wiped sweat from his brow and led the skittish bay gelding into the stables, the air thick with the scent of wet earth and horses. Rain pelted the slate roof as the wind howled through the cracks in the old beams. Owen secured the gelding in its stall, whispering soft reassurances to calm its nerves. His hands, rough and calloused, moved with practiced ease over the buckles and leather straps. The stable smelled of straw, damp wood, and something warm and alive. Just as he reached for a pitchfork, the door slammed open. She stood framed in the doorway, backlit by the storm. A vision in emerald riding skirts and a soaked velvet cloak, with hair like fire untamed. Lady Magnolia Huxley, daughter of the Baron. She was not supposed to be here, certainly not alone. Her eyes, a striking violet in the dim light, scanned the stable before landing on him. Owen froze. "My mare spooked," she said, breathless. "Ran straight into the woods. I had to walk back. The storm. You shouldn't be out here, my lady," Owen said, voice low, deferential. "Not in weather like this." She stepped inside anyway, unbothered by his tone, brushing rain from her sleeves. "And yet here I am." The door creaked shut behind her, muffling the wind. She looked around the stable, her fingers trailing along the edge of a stall. The horses snorted and shifted in their pens. "I've always liked the stables," she said softly, as though speaking more to herself than to him. "They're honest. The walls don't whisper here." Owen hesitated. He had seen her from afar, on balconies in rose gardens, gliding through drawing rooms like something painted in oils. But never this close. Never this real. Her boots were muddied, her cloak torn at the hem, a single curl clung to her cheek. "Would you like to wait here till the storm passes?" he offered, gesturing to the hayloft. "It's dry up there. Safer, too." She looked at him for a long moment. A stable boy offering shelter. A lady who had never been offered anything freely in her life. "Yes," she said. "That would be nice." He climbed the ladder first and extended a hand to help her. She hesitated, then took it, her glove damp, her fingers cool and delicate in his. They sat together in the loft, the rain drumming a rhythm against the roof above them. Between them, a silence settled, not awkward, but expectant. "So, what's your name?" she asked at last. "Owen," he said. "Owen Thatcher." "And I'm Magnolia," she said, "not Lady Huxley, not daughter of the Baron. Just Magnolia." She smiled like it was a secret. In that loft, with nothing but straw and stormlight between them, something flickered, wild and quiet. Something neither of them dared to name. Not yet. The days after the storm passed like the quiet moments after a held breath. Summer clung to the edges of the air, ripening the orchards and softening the soil, but something had changed, at least in Owen's world. She came back. Not with fanfare or chaperones, not with her usual retinue of maids and lace. Magnolia arrived each morning just after the fog lifted from the hills, cloaked in simpler riding clothes, as though trying to forget who she was for an hour. Always on horseback, always with purpose, and always alone. "I want to learn to ride without fear," she had said that second morning, reins slack in her gloved hands as she dismounted near the fence. "Without some lord guiding the horse for me. Can you teach me, Owen?" He had hesitated then. A stable boy instructing the Baron's daughter? One word and he'd be dismissed, maybe worse. But she'd stood there, wind tugging at her braid, a stubborn spark in her eyes. And he had nodded, not trusting his voice. They met in the meadow behind the stables, where the ground was soft and open. Owen taught her how to adjust the girth, how to mount without help, how to feel the horse's movement rather than fight it. Magnolia listened intently, asking sharp questions. She wasn't just playing at rebellion, she was building something. Maybe freedom. Maybe armor. Sometimes they paused beneath the old apple tree, its branches heavy with green fruit. Magnolia would toss him one with a smirk, and they'd eat in silence while the horses grazed nearby. She'd speak of poetry, of books she wasn't supposed to read, of France and ship routes and languages she practiced in secret. Owen spoke less, but when he did, it mattered, his words shaped like rough stones, honest and heavy. "You don't belong here," she said once, wiping juice from her chin with the back of her hand. He looked at her, puzzled. "The estate. This world. The servants' quarters, the silence. You're too awake for it." He shrugged. "And you don't belong in corsets and drawing rooms." She grinned. "Perhaps we're both lost, then." The stables became their haven. A place of unspoken understanding, where names and titles fell away like old saddles. Owen found himself watching the way her fingers curled into the reins, how she laughed when her horse galloped too fast, how she bit her lip when nervous. He told himself it meant nothing. He told himself it would pass. But when she touched his hand to thank him, just a moment, fingers brushing his wrist, his heart betrayed him. In the loft that evening, lying back on a pile of straw after cleaning tack, he stared up at the rafters and whispered her name into the quiet. Magnolia. The wind carried it out through the cracks, past the hay, the stalls, the world he'd always known. The estate came alive with color and glass and gold. By the morning of the midsummer ball, Hawthorne Manor, no Huxley Hall as the nobility insisted, had transformed. Servants polished brass sconces and hung garlands over the grand archways. Musicians arrived by carriage. The kitchen buzzed with heat and flour, and the scent of spiced pears drifted out to the gardens. Owen watched from the edges, silent as always. Invisible in plain sight. His shirt was damp with sweat from hauling crates of wine and cleaning the courtyard stones till they shone like silver. He heard the whispers, guests arriving from London, a viscount's son, some earl from Devonshire, and Lord Whitmore, whose name made Owen's stomach tighten for reasons he didn't fully understand. By late afternoon, the carriages began to arrive, gleaming things pulled by horses Owen had brushed himself. He watched their hooves strike the cobblestones with sharp clacks, watched lords step out in deep navy and silver trim, ladies in gowns that moved like water. It was a dream wrapped in velvet and champagne. He wasn't meant to be near the ballroom. But after his work was done, after the last lantern had been lit, he wandered toward the open side corridor that overlooked the festivities. No one noticed the stable boy in the shadows. And then there she was. Magnolia descended the staircase like she'd been carved from moonlight and fire. Her gown was deep crimson, the color of ripe cherries and courage. Her hair, swept into loose waves, gleamed copper beneath the chandeliers. Around her neck, a single pearl. She didn't look for him. Not once. Instead, she was swept into the arms of Lord Whitmore, tall, graying at the temples, laughing as though the world was already his. His hand lingered too long at her waist. His smile was too certain. And Magnolia, though her lips smiled too, didn't meet anyone's eyes. Owen felt it then, not jealousy, not quite. Something heavier. Something close to grief. He turned to go, but a voice stopped him. "She's promised to him, you know." Owen looked up to see Beatrice, one of the kitchen maids, watching him with something close to pity. "The Baron announced it this morning at breakfast," she said. Quietly. "It'll be public by week's end." Owen nodded slowly, though his hands had curled into fists at his sides. "She doesn't love him," Beatrice added softly, like a small kindness. "I know," Owen murmured, but it didn't matter. The truth wouldn't change what must happen. He left the manor before the second waltz began. The air outside was cool, the stars low and bright. From the stables, he could still hear the music, light, elegant, distant, like it belonged to another world. He climbed into the loft, as he had so many times, and sat there alone in the hay, the silence thick around him. He should leave. There was nothing for him here now. Not with her belonging to another. The morning after the ball, the world was quiet in that strange, heavy way it gets after celebration, like it was embarrassed by its own excess. Streamers clung to hedgerows, a broken wineglass glittered near the fountain, and inside the manor, the curtains stayed drawn longer than usual. Owen had already decided. He saddled the chestnut mare before the sun cleared the treetops. No goodbyes, no risks. He would leave before his heart made a fool of him again. Before he had to watch Magnolia become someone else's memory. He brushed down the saddle, tightening the girth for what might be the last time in this place. His small pack, bread, a flask, a bit of coin, was tucked beneath the blanket. He moved on instinct, quick and silent, like a ghost preparing to vanish. But when he reached for the stirrup to hoist himself up, his hand brushed something tucked beneath the leather. Paper. Folded. Crisp. Tied with a thin green ribbon. He froze. Heart pounding, he pulled the letter free. The ribbon slipped between his fingers like a breath. The parchment smelled faintly of lavender and smoke. Owen. Don't go. Not yet. Not without reading this. The handwriting was hers, delicate, sharp-edged, familiar in a way that made his throat tighten. He unfolded the letter slowly, each word striking like hooves on cobblestone. I tried to find you after the ball. You were gone. Maybe you knew what was coming. Yes, my father has chosen Lord Whitmore. And yes, I smiled because that is what they taught me to do. But I couldn't sleep last night. Not while knowing you might leave without hearing the one truth I've never said aloud. I love you. I don't know when it happened. Maybe in the rain that night, maybe under the apple tree, or maybe it was always there, waiting for me to be brave enough. They will never let us be. Not here. Not in this world. But I have heard stories. Of ships that sail west. Of a place where no one knows my name, or yours. Where titles don't matter and stables are just stables, not cages. There's a ship leaving from Liverpool in 9 days. I will meet you at the river crossing 2 nights before. If you are there, I will go with you. Anywhere. If you're not, I'll know you chose safety. And I won't blame you. But I'll never forget you. Magnolia. He read it twice. Then a third time. And when he looked up from the page, the morning had changed. The air felt sharper. The world more possible. He folded the letter carefully and tucked it into his coat. Then he unsaddled the mare, set her free into the pasture, and walked back into the stables, not to leave, not yet. He had 9 days. 9 days to prepare for the unthinkable. 9 days to choose between love and fear. The sky was black with stars the night they ran. Owen stood by the river crossing just before midnight, the moon hanging low and full, casting pale reflections in the slow-moving water. The trees whispered overhead, and every crack of twig beneath his boots made his heart leap. He held a small satchel over his shoulder, clothes, tools, a tin of bread and salt. The letter still rested in his coat pocket, worn at the folds from too many readings. He hadn't known if she would come. But then he heard hooves. The sound was quick, light, urgent. He turned just in time to see her appear through the trees like a figure from a dream. Magnolia on a dark mare, her riding cloak billowing, her face flushed with the wind. She pulled up beside him, breathless. "You're here," she whispered. "You too," he replied, a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. She reached into her cloak and handed him a second satchel, wrapped in a shawl. "Coin. Maps. Some of my mother's jewelry. I hated to take it, but we'll need it." He took it wordlessly. There was no time for sentiment. They crossed the river by moonlight, the icy water licking at their boots as their horses stepped carefully through the stones. On the other side, freedom. Or something like it. They rode fast and quiet through the hills, following the back roads Owen had scouted over the past week. Magnolia rode like she was born in the saddle now, no longer a girl playing at escape, but a woman racing toward her own life. They were almost 3 miles out when the sky behind them changed. A bloom of red on the horizon. Then another. Owen pulled his horse to a halt and turned. Smoke. He didn't need to ask. "The stables," he murmured. Magnolia's face twisted with shock. "They set them ablaze? Someone must have seen us. Or noticed the horses missing." His fists clenched. "They're burning it to punish me. Or to stop us." She reached for his hand. "We can't go back." But he was already turning his horse. "I have to." "What are you?" Owen know. "There are foals in the back stalls. And Harlan, the old gelding. He can't move quick." His voice was quiet but steady. "I can't let them die. Go ahead, ride to the woods. I'll find you at the East Mill by dawn." "Owen!" But he was already gone, thundering back into the dark. The stable was an inferno by the time he arrived. Flames licked the rafters, casting the yard in flickering gold. The heat hit him like a wall, but he pushed through it, eyes squinting, coughing against the smoke. Inside, the horses screamed. High, terrible cries that tore through the night. He didn't think, just moved. One by one, he unlatched the stalls, slapping the rumps of the panicked horses to drive them into the night. The old gelding Harlan collapsed halfway to the exit, but Owen pulled, grunted, coaxed, until the beast stumbled outside, trembling but alive. His shirt stuck to his back with sweat. Embers rained down like ash. A loud crack split the night as a beam came crashing down behind him, fire roaring through the roof. And then a voice. Owen! He turned. Magnolia stood just outside the smoke, tears streaking down her soot-covered cheeks. You said dawn, he coughed, staggering toward her. You said you'd live, she shot back, grabbing his arm. Now come. They fled together, side by side, the stables collapsing behind them. Firelight lit the hills like sunrise, and above them, the stars blinked on, indifferent, eternal. By the time they reached the eastern mill, the sky had begun to pale. Owen dropped to his knees beside the river, coughing, breath ragged, hands raw. Magnolia knelt beside him, cupped his face in her hands. I thought I lost you. You nearly did, he rasped. They leaned into each other, dirt-streaked and breathless and alive. And behind them, the only home they'd ever known burned quietly to the ground. The ship was not majestic. It smelled of salt, tar, and sweat. Its name, the Caledonia, was faded on the bow, half-scraped by sea winds and storms. It rocked gently in the Liverpool harbor when Owen and Magnolia boarded under false names and nervous hearts. He was Mr. Hart. She, his wife. No one asked questions. Not here. Below deck, they were shown to a cramped cabin barely wider than a broom closet, walls slick with damp. 2 narrow bunks. A single porthole. The air hung thick with mildew and something sour. Magnolia said nothing, only removed her gloves and placed her pack on the floor with surprising grace. Owen watched her, wondering how someone raised in silk and glass could look so steady in a room that felt like a coffin. She caught him staring. I've slept in worse, she said, cracking a smile. Once in a greenhouse after a party, I nearly froze. They laughed, and the fear loosened its grip. The voyage began with calm waters, long skies, and the illusion that they had made the right choice. Days bled into each other, painted in shades of blue and gray. Owen worked for his passage, helping the sailors with rope and cargo. Magnolia spent hours above deck, breathing the sea air like it was something holy. They learned to read the moods of the sea and each other. She would press her hand to the railing when the waves grew choppy, eyes closed like she could will the ship still. He would watch her from below, knowing when to hold her and when to give her space. She was no longer the Baron's daughter here. Not Lady Magnolia. Just Maggie Hart, wife of a quiet, strong-handed man who rarely smiled but never looked away. Some nights they talked in whispers, huddled in their small bunk, telling truths they'd never said before. I used to dream of being a painter, she admitted once. Not for society. Just for myself. Why didn't you? My father said it was a waste of oils. He reached over and brushed a curl behind her ear. I'd still like to see what you'd paint. She smiled softly, but her eyes were glassy with salt and memory. Midway across the Atlantic, the storms came. Not the gentle kind. These were monstrous, howling, relentless things that tossed the ship like a toy. The sea turned black, the wind screamed, and the crew shouted over crashing waves. Magnolia clung to Owen as the ship bucked violently. She vomited for days, her skin pale, her eyes dim. Owen stayed by her side, feeding her sips of water, whispering comfort as the wood groaned around them. I'm sorry, she murmured once in the dark. If I die out here. You won't, he said, voice raw. Not now. Not after everything. When the storm broke, it was as if the sky had mercy. The sea calmed, the clouds scattered, and the world resumed breathing. They stood together on the deck one morning, wrapped in a single threadbare blanket, watching the first gulls circle the sky. Land, she asked, breath catching. Owen nodded. Soon. She leaned her head on his shoulder. It was not the end, but it was a beginning. Boston rose out of the fog like a city built on a dream. The harbor bustled with steam and shouts, the air thick with the scent of brine and fish and something smokier, coal, maybe, or ambition. Magnolia stood at the bow as the Caledonia creaked into port, her hands clutching the railing, her eyes wide. Not with fear. With awe. Owen came up beside her, shoulders stiff, pack already slung over one shoulder. He had never seen so many people moving in so many directions. No titles here. No names that carried weight like chains. Just motion. Just survival. They stepped onto American soil without ceremony. No one bowed. No one asked who she was. The world didn't care what blood flowed through their veins, only whether they had something to offer. And they did. They headed inland, leaving behind the crowded ports and cobbled streets of Boston for the green hills of Pennsylvania, where Owen had heard of a horse ranch in need of hands. The train ride was long, jostling, and loud. Magnolia stared at the landscape like it might vanish if she blinked. Small towns rose up like mirages, places with names like Dover Hollow and Windmere's Crossing. Finally, they arrived in a valley town just outside Harrisburg, surrounded by pine-covered hills and thick farmland. They rented a room above the butcher's shop. One small bed, one narrow window, and floors that creaked like old timbers. It wasn't what they had dreamed of, but it was theirs. Owen found work within a week at a livery stable on the edge of town. The owner, a grizzled widower named Mr. Brenner, didn't ask many questions. He paid little, but the horses were good and the work honest. Owen was good with animals, always had been, and soon earned quiet respect among the other hands. Magnolia, now Maggie Hart, as written on the schoolhouse forms, took up teaching at the town's one-room school. The children didn't care that she spoke with a lilting English accent or that her clothes, once fine, had been remade from old fabric and careful stitches. She taught them letters, numbers, poems by candlelight. She taught them to question gently, to speak clearly, to dream. And they adored her. One evening, months after arriving, they walked together through the orchard behind the schoolhouse. The leaves were turning, orange and red and gold, and the scent of apples hung sweet in the crisp air. "I miss the apples at home," she said, brushing her fingers along the bark of a young tree. "But these taste like freedom." He looked at her, her hair tied back with twine, her hands ink-stained from the day's lessons, her boots muddied from the walk, and felt something bloom in his chest. Not just love, belonging. "This is home," he said. She nodded, then reached into her coat and pulled out a crumpled letter, the one he thought she'd burned long ago. The one from her father, written months before, postmarked from England. "He wrote again," she said softly. Owen's jaw tightened. "What does he want?" She looked down. "To see me. To offer forgiveness. Maybe an apology. He says he's changed. Do you believe him?" "I don't know," she whispered. "But I don't need it anymore." She crumpled the letter tighter in her hand and tossed it into the grass. Then she turned to Owen. "You're the only truth I ever found." He pulled her to him, kissed her beneath the orange trees. And the past, for the first time, stayed behind. The letter arrived on a morning painted in frost. Owen found it in the butcher's mailbox, a cream-colored envelope sealed with wax and stamped with an English crest. He turned it over in his hands, knowing before he opened it who had sent it. Baron Alistair Huxley. The ink inside was careful, old-fashioned, regretful. "Dearest Magnolia, word of your whereabouts has reached me, though I had to bribe half the Atlantic to confirm it. If you are reading this, then you are alive. That is all I dared hope for these past 2 years. I will be in Harrisburg in a fortnight's time. Not to demand, not to shame, but to see you one last time, with the eyes of a father, not a baron. If you choose to see me, I will be waiting at the First Methodist Church on Sunday, just after the bells. If not, I will leave with no further word and never darken your door again. Father." Magnolia read it once in silence. Then again. She said nothing for a long time. The Sunday bells rang through the cold air, echoing down the hills and through the streets of the town. Owen walked with her to the edge of the square, their hands clasped beneath her shawl. They stood just out of view of the church steps. "I don't have to go," she said. He looked at her. Not the girl who had once trembled at garden parties, but the woman who taught children to speak and had crossed oceans for a future no one had given her. "Do you want to?" he asked. She hesitated, then nodded. "I need to see the end of it." He waited in the alley while she stepped into the sunlight, the sound of leaves scraping against cobblestones beneath her boots. The Baron stood at the top of the church steps, wrapped in a dark overcoat, his cane planted beside him. He looked smaller than she remembered. Older, like a statue left in the rain. When he saw her, his posture broke. He removed his hat. Magnolia didn't smile, but she didn't turn away. They spoke quietly. There were no grand gestures, no dramatic embraces. Just words. Careful ones. A father grieving something he'd only realized was precious after it was gone. A daughter who had learned to stop asking for permission. After 10 minutes, she stepped away. He did not follow. She returned to Owen with her face unreadable. "Well," he asked. She slipped her hand back into his. "He's not the villain I made him," she said. "But I'm not his anymore." Not really. They walked home together, back to their little apartment above the butcher's, past the schoolhouse and the orchard and the life they had carved into this new land. They passed a wagon full of laughing children and a woman waving from a porch swing. The world felt quiet, but not small. That night, they sat in their kitchen by the fire. Magnolia opened her sketchbook and began to draw, a horse in motion, a girl in a red gown, a boy holding out his hand. Owen poured tea. No titles, no secrets, only love. And when the wind shifted through the windows and touched the old letter on the shelf, it did not scatter it. It simply passed by.